Between now and July 2026, 7 different crises are going to collide at the same time, and the decisions you make in the next 90 days, not the next year, not the next decade, the next 90 days, will determine whether your family comes out of this intact or whether you get caught in the middle of something that most people will not see coming until it is already on top of them. And I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like I am trying to scare you, but everything I am about to tell you in this video is sourced, time-stamped, and verifiable. And by the end of it, you are going to understand why economists, analysts, and even Wall Street banks are calling the next 90 days the stress test for the entire American economy. Those are not my words. That is a direct quote from a U.S. economic forecast published in March 2026, the stress test. Because right now, simultaneously, we have a war in Iran that has closed the most important energy choke point on Earth for over a month with no clear end in sight. We have diesel at $5.40 a gallon, crushing the trucking industry that moves 72.5% of everything in this country. We have a fertilizer crisis that the FAO says gives us a 3-month window before it becomes a full-blown global food emergency. We have health insurance premiums that just doubled for 22 million Americans on January 1st. We have a labor market that lost 92,000 jobs in February, while AI is now the #1 reason companies are firing people. We have a national debt that just crossed $39 trillion with interest payments exceeding $1 trillion a year. And we have a Federal Reserve that cannot cut rates because inflation is too high and cannot raise rates because the labor market is too fragile. All of that is converging in the next 90 days. And if you are not paying attention, you are going to be making decisions in August that you should have been making in April. So let me walk you through exactly what is coming, when it is coming, and what it means for your family. Because this is not a video about what might happen someday. This is a video about what is already in motion right now. Let me start with the one that is going to affect every single person watching this video, regardless of how much money you make or where you live. The food supply timeline. Right now, as of early April 2026, the Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed for over 5 weeks. That strait carries approximately 1/3 of all seaborne fertilizer trade on Earth. The Arabian Gulf accounts for 46% of global urea exports. Urea is the single most widely used nitrogen fertilizer on the planet. Without it, crop yields collapse. Prices have already surged 47% since the war started. And unlike oil, there are no strategic fertilizer reserves anywhere in the world. When this supply is cut, it is cut. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace published an analysis this week that said even if the strait reopens tomorrow, restarting fertilizer production and transport could take weeks. Weeks that Northern Hemisphere farmers do not have because planting season is closing right now. The FAO's chief economist Maximo Torero said there is a 3-month window before the risks escalate significantly, affecting global planting decisions for 2026 and beyond. That 3-month window started in early March, which means by early June, if the strait is still closed or the supply chains have not been rebuilt, the damage to this year's crop yields is locked in. You cannot go back and plant what was not planted. You cannot retroactively apply fertilizer that was not available, and the food that does not grow this spring will not be on your grocery shelf this fall. That is not a theory. That is agricultural science. And the World Food Program has warned that 45 million additional people worldwide could be pushed into acute food insecurity because of this conflict. The UN projects global food prices could average 15 to 20% higher in the first half of 2026, and grocery prices in the United States were already 24% above pre-pandemic levels before any of this started. The USDA's March outlook projects another 3.1% increase this year at a minimum, and that projection was made before the full impact of the fertilizer shortage was factored in. A corn farmer in Iowa named Jolene Reese told CNN that the cost of her fertilizer order went up $13,000 in 2 days. She said at today's corn prices she could lose $110 per acre across her 530 acres. That is $58,000 in losses on a farm that has been in her family for 85 years. She checks the commodity market 6 times a day. That is what the next 90 days looks like for the people who actually grow your food. And the transportation layer on top of this is just as fragile. Diesel is at $5.40 nationally and over $7 in California. FITR Transportation Intelligence says fuel costs per mile for truckers went up 21 to 24 cents in just 3 weeks, the largest increase on record. Small independent truckers, the owner-operators who move the majority of spot market freight in this country, are parking their rigs because it costs more to drive than they earn per load. A trucker in South Dakota named Jamie Hagan said this is the nail in the coffin for his company. His fuel pump hit $999.99 and shut off before his tank was full. And when small truckers exit the market, the capacity does not get replaced. ACT research confirmed that unlike 2022, the trucks coming off the road this time are not being absorbed by larger carriers. That means fewer trucks on the road. Fewer trucks means slower deliveries. Slower deliveries means empty shelves. And the American Trucking Associations published a report showing that the average grocery store has between 3 and 5 days of inventory at any given time. 3 to 5 days between a full store and an empty one. And in a crisis, panic buying accelerates that timeline to hours. So here is your 90-day food timeline. April through May, fertilizer shortages reduce planting and nutrient application across the Northern Hemisphere. June, the FAO's 3-month window closes and the damage to crop yields is locked in. July through August, the reduced yields begin showing up in commodity prices. September through November, those higher commodity prices cascade into the grocery store. And if diesel stays above $5, the transportation costs amplify every single one of those increases. That is not a prediction. That is the supply chain math. And the clock started 5 weeks ago. While most people are focused on gas prices and grocery bills, there is another crisis that already detonated on January 1st and is going to reach its full destructive force in the next 90 days. The enhanced premium tax credits that kept Affordable Care Act health insurance affordable for over 22 million Americans expired at midnight on December 31st, 2025. And according to KFF, premiums for subsidized enrollees more than doubled overnight, a 114% increase on average, from $888 a year to $1,904 a year. A 26-year-old woman in Brooklyn named Tyrell saw her monthly premium jump by $700 in a single month. She told CNBC her stomach dropped when she saw the number. And she is not an outlier. KFF surveyed over 1,000 adults who had ACA plans and found that 9%, roughly 1 in 10, have already dropped their insurance entirely because they cannot afford it. Another 17% say they are not confident they can pay their premiums this year, which means they are at risk of dropping coverage too. More than half of people who kept their plans said they are cutting spending on food and clothing to afford their health insurance. 43% are looking for extra work. 21% are taking on credit card debt specifically to pay for health care. And the Congressional Budget Office projects that total ACA marketplace enrollment will collapse to 12.5 million by 2028, which would erase nearly all coverage gains since 2021. Here is why the next 90 days matter for this. The open enrollment period for most state ACA marketplaces has already closed. The people who are currently paying these doubled premiums are locked into them for the rest of the year unless they experience a qualifying life event. That means between now and July, millions of Americans are going to be making monthly payments they cannot afford on health insurance that many of them will not be able to use because they downgraded to bronze plans with higher deductibles to save on premiums. They are paying more for less, and they are trapped in it for the rest of the year. And this is landing on families at the exact same time that gas is at $4.08, diesel is at $5.40, groceries are climbing, and the labor market just lost 92,000 jobs in a single month. These are not separate problems. They are simultaneous hits to the same family budget. And for the families who dropped coverage entirely, one medical emergency in the next 90 days could mean bankruptcy. Medical debt is already the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. And now 2.2 million more people are uninsured than would have been if the subsidies had continued. That is a ticking time bomb sitting underneath millions of American households, and every month that passes without a legislative fix makes the explosion bigger. The labor market is one bad month from breaking. I want you to understand something about the job market right now that the headlines are not capturing. The unemployment rate at 4.4% sounds fine on paper. It sounds stable. It sounds manageable. But underneath that number is a labor market that is more fragile than anything we have seen since the pandemic. The economy lost 92,000 jobs in February, which was far worse than the 59,000 gain that economists had projected. Goldman Sachs has raised its 12-month recession probability to 30%. Moody's Analytics has its AI recession model at 49%, which is one single percentage point below the threshold that has preceded every U.S. recession in the past 80 years. And here is the part that should genuinely concern you. The job market is not crashing. It is freezing. Economists call it a low-hire, low-fire environment. Companies are not laying off massive numbers of people yet, but they are not hiring either. The hiring rate for unemployed workers has been declining for 3 consecutive months, according to the Chicago Fed. That means if you lose your job right now, the probability of finding a new one is getting lower every month. And the Roosevelt Institute published an analysis showing that once you strip out healthcare and education, the rest of the economy actually lost over 500,000 jobs in the past year. The entire job market is being held up by two sectors, and if those sectors slow down, everything falls. AI is making this worse, not better. In March 2026, AI was the #1 cited reason for job cuts for the first time ever, accounting for 25% of all announced layoffs. Goldman Sachs estimates AI is displacing roughly 16,000 American jobs every single month. The tech sector unemployment rate has climbed to 5.8%, the highest since the dot-com bust, and the median time to re-employment for a laid-off tech worker went from 3.2 months in 2024 to 4.7 months in early 2026. Young workers are being hit hardest. The unemployment rate for Americans aged 16 to 24 has been above 10% and rising for 6 months. Job-finding rates for workers aged 22 to 25 in AI-exposed occupations have dropped 14% since ChatGPT launched. The underemployment rate for recent college graduates hit 42.5% at the end of 2025, and the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research explicitly warned that affordability will be the top concern for consumers heading into the November midterm elections. Which means every politician in the country knows the labor market is weak, they know people are struggling, and they are calculating how to use that suffering for political leverage rather than actually fixing it. In the next 90 days, we will see 2 more monthly jobs reports, an FOMC meeting in late April, and the beginning of the midterm campaign season. If either of those jobs reports comes in negative again, the recession conversation goes from possibility to probability. And once that narrative takes hold in the media, consumer confidence collapses, spending contracts, businesses pull back on hiring even further, and the cycle feeds itself. That is why the next 90 days are a stress test. Not because a recession is guaranteed, but because the margin for error has never been thinner. The war has no exit, and your wallet knows it. Let me address the thing that is driving half of everything I just talked about, because I think a lot of people are operating under the assumption that this war is going to end soon and everything will go back to normal. It is not, and it is not because I am a pessimist. It is because the data does not support that assumption. Donald Trump proposed a $1.5 trillion defense budget, which represents a $500 billion increase over the current level. On the same day, he requested a 10% cut to non-defense spending. You do not request $500 billion in additional military funding for a conflict that is supposed to last 2 weeks. That math only works if this goes on for a very long time. The war has been costing between $500 million and $1 billion per day. And the infrastructure damage in the Middle East, particularly to energy facilities in the Gulf states, is not something that gets fixed with a ceasefire. Qatar's Ras Laffan LNG complex sustained damage that analysts estimate will take 3 to 5 years to fully repair. 3 to 5 years. That alone will keep global LNG prices elevated for the rest of this decade, regardless of what happens with the war. And the Strait of Hormuz is not going to snap back to normal even if a ceasefire is reached tomorrow. Maritime insurance premiums have surged from 0.25% of vessel value to 5 to 10%, a 20 to 40-fold increase. Shipping companies are not going to send their tankers through a waterway where premiums are 40 times higher until they are absolutely certain it is safe, and that confidence takes months to rebuild. The IEA released its strategic petroleum reserves, 400 million barrels, the largest drawdown in history, and it barely moved the needle. That is the nuclear option in the energy policy toolkit, and it did not work. Gas is still above $4. Diesel is still above $5. And Brent crude touched $126 per barrel at its peak. Goldman Sachs estimates that if the Strait disruption lasts beyond another month, headline inflation could spike to 4.5% this spring. They have already pushed their expected Fed rate cuts back to September and December, which means borrowing costs for mortgages, car loans, credit cards, and business loans are staying elevated for at least another 5 months. 5 months of high rates while gas is at $4, diesel is at $5.40. Groceries are climbing, health insurance has doubled, and the job market is frozen. That is the next 90 days. That is what every American family is walking into right now. And the people in charge are talking about ceasefire timelines and diplomatic windows while families are choosing between filling their gas tank and filling their refrigerator. The debt ceiling nobody is watching. And while all of this is happening, there is another deadline approaching that almost nobody in the media is covering because it does not generate the same emotional reaction as gas prices or grocery bills. But it might be the most consequential of all. The national debt just crossed $39 trillion. It will hit $40 trillion before the November midterms, according to the Peterson Foundation. Interest payments alone are costing the government $1.04 trillion a year, which is more than the entire defense budget. The CBO projects the deficit will reach $1.9 trillion this fiscal year and $3.1 trillion by 2036. And the debt-to-GDP ratio is on track to hit 120% by 2036, eclipsing the all-time record set after World War II. But here is the thing that directly affects your family in the next 90 days. The Highway Trust Fund authorization expires on September 30, 2026. That fund pays for road and bridge maintenance across the country, and it faces a $340 billion deficit over the next decade. If Congress does not reauthorize it, infrastructure projects stall, construction jobs disappear, and the roads and bridges you drive on every day continue to deteriorate. And Social Security's Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is projected to go insolvent by 2032. That is 6 years away. But the political maneuvering to address it starts now, in the next 90 days, as candidates position themselves for the midterms. And the Brookings Institution warned that senators elected in 2026 will have no choice but to address Social Security insolvency during their 6-year term. That means every candidate running this fall will have to take a position on whether to cut benefits, raise taxes, or both. And for the 70 million people currently receiving Social Security and the 185 million workers paying into it, the decisions being made in the next 90 days will shape the trajectory of the program for the rest of their lives. The median 401k balance for a 65-year-old is $95,000. After taxes, that is closer to $75,000. That is supposed to fund 20 to 30 years of retirement. And 77% of older adults say the 2.8% cost of living adjustment for 2026 is not enough to keep up with rising prices. If Social Security benefits are cut by the projected 23% when the trust fund runs dry, a retired couple making $75,000 a year loses over $900 a month. A single senior making $30,000 loses $350 a month. That is not a distant threat. That is a mathematical certainty unless Congress acts. And Congress is heading into a midterm election cycle where both parties will be more focused on winning seats than solving structural problems. The next 90 days will determine the political framing of Social Security for the rest of this decade. And if you are over 50, what happens in those 90 days will directly shape the retirement you thought you were going to have. I want you to see all of this together now, because that is the part that nobody else is doing. The media covers gas prices as one story. They cover health insurance as another story. They cover the job market as another story. They cover the war as another story. And they never connect them. But they are all the same story. They are all hitting the same family budget at the same time during the same 90-day window. Let me show you what a typical American family is facing right now in April 2026 compared to where they were in April 2025. Gas is up 30%. Diesel is up over 40%, which means everything delivered by truck costs more. Grocery prices are up at least 3% with another 15 to 20% increase projected if the strait stays closed. Health insurance premiums doubled for anyone on an ACA plan. Car insurance went up 46% over the past 2 years. The average car payment is $742 a month, a record. The average mortgage payment is $2,205. Electric bills are exploding across the country with increases of 40 to 100% in many states. Credit card debt is at $1.28 trillion with an average APR of 22.8%. Total household debt is at $18.8 trillion, the highest ever recorded. And the job market just lost 92,000 positions in a single month. Now add all of that together and ask yourself this question. How many more months can the average family absorb this before something breaks? Not the economy, not the stock market, not GDP, the family, the actual household, the actual checking account. How many more $742 car payments and $2,205 mortgage payments and $400 grocery runs and doubled health insurance premiums can a family making $80,000 or even $100,000 a year sustain before they start missing payments, before they start using credit cards for groceries, before they stop going to the doctor, before they pull their kids out of activities, before they start lining up at food banks? Because that is already happening. Food bank visits in Minnesota doubled to 9 million last year. In Massachusetts, 40% of households are food insecure. 25% of people are skipping meals entirely. 44 million Americans are food insecure right now. And these are not just people in poverty. These are working families, middle-class families, dual-income households, people making $80,000 to $100,000 a year who cannot keep up. And the next 90 days will determine whether this stabilizes or accelerates. If the strait reopens and oil prices fall, there is relief. If the war drags on and diesel stays above $5, the cascade continues. If the Fed cuts rates, borrowing costs ease. If inflation stays hot, rates stay elevated. If the job market posts another negative month, recession fears trigger a pullback in spending that makes everything worse. Every one of those variables will be resolved, for better or worse, in the next 90 days. And your family's financial position at the end of those 90 days will depend on the decisions you make right now, what you should do right now. I am not going to end this video the way most finance channels end their videos, by telling you to diversify your portfolio or buy gold or start a side hustle. Because I think you are past that. I think you know something is wrong. I think you can feel it. And I think what you need right now is not inspiration. You need a plan. So here is what I would do if I were sitting where you are sitting right now, with 90 days of converging pressure, bearing down on my family. First, audit your fixed expenses this week. Not this month. This week, look at every recurring charge on your bank statement and your credit cards. Every subscription, every insurance premium, every automatic payment. I guarantee you there are charges you forgot about and charges that went up without you noticing. Car insurance companies in particular are counting on your exhaustion. They raise your rate by $50 or $100 and they bet you will not call. Call. A woman in one of the clips I reviewed switched companies and saved $2,000 a year on car insurance. $2,000? That is real money. Second, stock your pantry now. Not in a panic buying way, in a strategic way. Buy a little extra of what you already eat every single time you go to the store. Canned goods, rice, pasta, dried beans, cooking oil, the basics. If grocery prices go up 15 to 20% this summer as the fertilizer crisis hits, every dollar you spend on food now is worth more than every dollar you spend on food in August. This is not prepping. This is math. Third, if you are carrying credit card debt at 22% interest, that is a financial emergency. Every month that debt sits there, it is growing faster than almost any investment you could make. Pay the minimums on everything else and throw every spare dollar at the highest interest card first. If you cannot make progress on the balance, call the company and ask for a hardship rate reduction. Many of them will lower your rate temporarily, if you ask. They would rather collect something than write it off. Fourth, build a 30-day emergency buffer, even if you have to start with $25 a week. If the job market posts another negative month and your company starts talking about restructuring or efficiency or AI integration, you need at least 30 days of runway, not 6 months. That is the ideal. 30 days is the minimum. Because in this labor market, where the median reemployment time has stretched to 4.7 months for tech workers and is climbing for everyone else, even 1 month of savings can be the difference between making decisions from a position of control versus making them from a position of desperation. Fifth, have the conversation with your family that nobody wants to have. Sit down with your spouse, your partner, your adult children, your parents. Put the actual numbers on the table. What do we spend? What do we owe? What happens if one of us loses our job? What happens if gas hits $5? What is our plan? Because the families who come through what is ahead will not be the ones who made the most money. They will be the ones who communicated the most honestly. I know this was a lot. I know some of it was hard to hear, but I would rather give you 90 days of warning than let you find out in August, when the shelves are thinner and the bills are higher and the options are fewer. The next 90 days will not determine whether America survives. America will survive. The question is whether your family comes out of it stronger or weaker, and that question is being answered right now. Not in Washington, not on Wall Street, at your kitchen table. If this video showed you something you did not see before, send it to one person who needs to hear it. Not for the algorithm. Because these conversations need to be happening right now in the places where they matter most. At the dinner table, between friends, between parents and their kids who are trying to figure out how to survive in this. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is evolving every single week, and I am going to keep breaking it down as it unfolds. No spin, no agenda, just the data and what it actually means for your life. Take care of yourselves out there, take care of your families, and I will see you in the next one.